Hi everyone, welcome to another Letters to an Asexual. This is number 129, and today I'm going to talk about being young, which is a topic that I guess I'm not that qualified to discuss anymore. But being what counts as an older ace these days, I promise there is some relevant stuff for those of us in my age group as well. So I'm going to read a couple of conversations, which are technically not letters to me, but they are things that I engaged with, and give you some perspectives about people coming out as ace or feeling that they're ace when they're very young, and how that is received in various communities and by various audiences. And then I'll just add on anything I can think of. So this person posted on Tumblr about a message to both the older people and the younger people about identifying as ace when they are those ages. And this is a message for older people, older ace people, who still think younger ace people should not come out as asexual that young. This is what that user says. If you are an older ace and are confident in how you feel, you should not, in my opinion, be turning someone away when they claim to be asexual, even if you feel it is not true, even if you think they are doing it for attention, even if you're somewhat annoyed by them. Yelling at them and telling them, in essence, to get out is, in my eyes, a form of erasure. Do young asexuals not exist? As people who have been on the topic, as people who may sometimes be approached by younger aces, we should be willing to be patient and understanding and point them in the right direction when they have questions. It sucks to try to find an explanation for what you're feeling and be turned away because you're too young, or told to wait and see because you're too young. As Asexual Life constantly says when she answers younger aces' questions, it isn't bad to begin exploring at an early age. And then for younger aces, keep an open mind. Sometimes when you're younger, you get comfortable with the community you're in, and then you want to deny other possibilities. I have pretty much come out 3 times in my life because I just learned new things about myself. And as I became more comfortable in my own skin and had some trial and error moments in my life, which really sucked, but it's okay to be wrong, and no one should judge for it. Now, I'm not saying that if you're claiming to be asexual that you're not. I'm simply saying to remember that even sexuality is fluid and people change over time. If you're comfortable with asexuality and you feel you are asexual, then good, you're asexual. Just know that there is a lot of time left in your life. I've spoken to full-grown adults in Avon who say that they have drifted more into aromantic grounds or feelings, and others that have gone other ways, and others still have found that they might have gone from homoromantic attraction to biromantic attraction. And I added on to this, kind of agreeing with most of what this person says. And I said, in most circles, I'm considered an older ace. I have never once in my entire life tried to tell someone younger than me that their sexual orientation was not legitimate because they weren't old enough to know themselves yet. If you do this, do you know how condescending and dismissive you sound? I felt asexual when I was 14 or 15. And though society had taught me to think I would later develop sexual feelings, I was secure even then in the knowledge that I felt what I felt. When people tried to tell me A, I was lying, B, I was wrong about myself, or C, I would change, it didn't reveal anything about myself to me. It revealed only that person's closed-mindedness and prejudice. There is very little to be gained by telling a young person that they are not the authority on their own feelings. If a young person thinks they're asexual and it turns out they're wrong, what purpose are you serving by preemptively denying their feelings and then hanging around to say, I told you so? You're just showing that you're yet another person they can't trust with their feelings, and you're yet another person who's repeating and reinforcing the status quo that everyone is attracted to other people. Yes, young asexuals should keep an open mind and should acknowledge that for some people sexuality is fluid, slow developing, or complicated. But why should young people and people of an asexual orientation be sorted into a special category of people who need to think harder about who they are? 14 or 15-year-old heterosexual kids don't get finger-wagged and talked down to about whether their feelings are real and whether they're mature enough yet to know whether what they're feeling is sexual or attraction. If you're gay, bi, pan, or asexual, oops, grown-ups really love telling you you're probably not qualified to explain, understand, or feel properly about an experience that is by definition subjective. Everyone goes through exploratory periods on a variety of levels and in a variety of elements of their lives. Young people especially, yes, they will find themselves. They do not need older people to stage parent them through their understandings of their sexual orientation. If they ask for guidance, yes, give it. If they ask for support, yes, give it. The worst thing you can do to a young person of any non-normative identity is to establish immediately that you will only believe them if they make certain statements, and that your support is contingent upon their identifying with a label under circumstances you choose. You may be a young non-heteronormative person's elder, parent, guardian, mentor, or other authority, but in this, trust me, you are not, nor should you want to be, the boss of them. And I would like to add on to that I like the part where I say we aren't some special category that needs to think harder about it, but I want to emphasize that the idea that young people are still developing, that's not new to them. They hear it all the time. You don't need to give them a reality check. They don't need to be told, yeah, you're going to change, you're going to think differently, you're going to want something differently when you're older. Like, you really don't need to help that message along if you're a person's elder. I promise you they have heard it, and even if nobody important in their life has ever directly said it to them, they receive this message very well through all kinds of media and societal expectations. Young people are not trusted in this society. They are mistrusted explicitly. They're mocked for feeling sure about something. And the thing is, we know from the vantage point of being older that, yeah, we did change a lot. There were things that we didn't expect to identify with when we were older. Like, yes, it's true. It is a thing. But like I said, that doesn't need to be emphasized in words. And it could even have a negative effect on somebody because they may want to resist changing because of the I told you so crap that they get. And I also just want to sort of modify something that I said in there, which is that I suggested that if you're straight, nobody tries to tell you that you're not at 15. And like, that's true. People generally don't have a problem with you saying that you're straight, but they do tend to still give you the message that your relationship is probably not forever, or that you don't know what love is. There's a lot of condescension that happens to young people and teenagers, even if they're pretty heteronormative. So I don't want to suggest that as long as you're straight, everybody believes you, because, you know, teenagers kind of have it rough when it comes to having people validate their feelings. And, you know, it doesn't take much. At least do no harm, right? Just don't tell them that their relationships are, oh, that's so adorable. It's so funny that you actually think this relationship is going to last past next week, you know. And you hear a lot of those framing of your feelings as being mercurial, being a phase. And it's just true that anybody who is not cis and not straight hears that kind of thing a lot more often. They are put into a box and told that they're probably just following a trend, and there can even be some dangerous interventions, like, you know, people who are very upset that their child is not straight and wants to send them to conversion therapy or something like that. And I mean, people act like that doesn't happen. It absolutely still happens. And even if they aren't literally sent to a camp, or like have a religious authority sicked on them or something like that, there can be some very persuasive and aggressive and abusive situations if your family is not supportive. So, you know, that's something that happens. So I'm going to read the other part of this. I got an anonymous request sent to me through my Tumblr inbox from someone who says, I keep trying to come out as ace to my family, but because I'm the youngest of the 4 siblings, no one takes it seriously. They just tell me I'm a sweet, innocent baby and give me sweets. Candy is nice, but I'd like to be taken seriously. Could you offer some advice? And I said, They tell you you're innocent and give you candy? Yeah, that doesn't sound like anything I've ever heard of. But in any case, if you're a young asexual and you come out but nobody believes you, you're just going to have to give it time. No matter what you do, if you're an asexual teenager, some people in your life are going to be jackasses about it and insist that you can't possibly know yourself yet. It's really condescending and infuriating, but getting confrontational about not being believed will usually be interpreted by those same kinds of people as further evidence of immaturity. This is not to say it shouldn't make you angry, because that's awful. But I know how people love to use young people's emotions against them to convince them that they're unbalanced, and you'll come out looking more mature to them if you give off a wise beyond your years, whatever will be vibe. I suggest making references to your asexuality in context-dependent situations. You know, not actively looking for reasons to bring it up, but if your perspective on sexual attraction is requested or expected, and you can say you're just not into it, that's fine for now. Assuming your sexuality doesn't shift as you get older and you move into your 20s and 30s, people like this usually find a different reason to disbelieve you and invalidate you. And the best thing you can do is just continue to be you, unapologetically, and maybe react to the occasional jerky comment with, you know, that's really condescending, or nobody would think it was weird if I felt straight at 15, or I didn't know you're the expert on what other people can feel. In short, try not to focus on making them believe you, and try to get comfortable with, well, I guess we'll wait and see, won't we? It's wrong for them to invalidate you, no matter what age you are. And as long as you know that, and don't let them convince you that you're wrong about yourself, you should be fine. So, the expectation that asexual people, especially people who come out when they're young, are looking for attention, or they're looking to try to be different, they're trying to be quirky, I feel like that should be okay. You know, for the most part, that's not kind. That's not fair to assume that that's why somebody is doing something. But even if it was, look at the alternative for how you react to that. If you are an older person who has somebody, some loved one who comes out to you and talks to you about their sexuality, and your reaction is to, like I said before, treat them like it's just cute and funny and ridiculous, or prove that you're not going to be a safe person to listen to, then what's going to happen is they're not going to share their future revelations with you. They're not going to feel like they can trust you for your support. And is that really worth destroying a relationship over? What you want to be is approachable. And even if, like one of my other responses said earlier, even if you kind of privately think, okay, that person is too young to understand what a sexuality is, or you're privately thinking that it's just a maturity issue, or that you believe that you've seen evidence that they are a different sexual orientation than the one that they're identifying as, that's not something to bring up in that conversation. Most people who come out to you, especially if it's staged, especially if it's a specific thing where they sit you down because they want to talk to you about it, it's because they want you to understand them. They want you to know them. They want to share an aspect of themselves with you, and they either felt some kind of obligation to talk to you, or they hopefully felt that you were a safe person to share that with, and that you were important enough in their life that you deserved to know this about them, so that you could know them, so that you could understand who they are in a more complete way. And having that mocked or rejected or reduced to a trend, it's very painful, even if at the time a lot of adults are going to say teenagers are just dramatic, blah, blah, blah. Okay, yeah, sometimes they can be dramatic. If we know that, then why aren't we acting like it's real? Why aren't we acting like this is as big as the world has been for them? And acknowledging that, understanding that that is their whole world up to this point. And so, of course, something like this is going to feel very big. I don't get why somebody who's much older and has much wider perspective wants to laugh at somebody who doesn't have that perspective. It doesn't make sense to me. And I actually once got a message where someone was accusing me of corrupting young people by putting this stuff out there. And I think I've talked about this in other videos. I've certainly talked about it in interviews. But when someone expresses that it'll actually harm young people to have this information out there, it is so gross to me, because the reason that we make our own content, that we make content for asexual people, even to be used for people who are emerging into their mature feelings for the first time and might be relatively young, we're making this content for ourselves to help us discover and learn and develop language to have conversations that we need to be able to have. And due to the relative rarity of asexuality, we aren't as likely to get to have as many conversations or quality conversations with people who happen to be in our social circle. Some of us have gotten lucky with that. But for the most part, the development of online communities and language to talk about it has been really vital to helping a lot of us understand ourselves. And I made an analogy, an extended analogy in another video about the football analogy, where I said, pretend you're in some fantasy world where football was a lot more important to the everyday lives of most people than it actually is in reality. Pretend from an early age you were assumed by everyone in your school and your parents and everything to either play, you were going to grow up to play on a team, or you were at least going to have a strong opinion about which team was your favorite. And, you know, as you got some exposure and grew up, you just kind of didn't relate to any of that and felt like it wasn't a big deal, and you actually didn't really like it very much. You didn't understand the hype. It just didn't do it for you, right? So my analogy there is, what if people reacted to you not liking football with repeatedly trying to push it on you, saying you must have had trauma, tricking you into coming over when there's a football game on, assigning you a football injury from when you tried to play, suggesting you're too scared to get hit in the head and that's why you're avoiding it. You know, just all these things that become part of how they understand you. And that when you finally got fed up with this and you wrote an essay, or you made a video about, like, hey, am I the only person who doesn't freaking like football? And people started responding with like, wow, I thought I was the only one. Then you would feel like, oh wow, I'm not the only one, and we need to have a conversation about this, not just for ourselves, but for all these people around us who don't understand what they're doing to us. And you don't feel empowered when you're the only person, but when you find out there's a bunch of people and there's a community, you kind of start to feel like, I don't have to take this. I don't think that my loved ones want to do this to me. They may think I'm genuinely sick for not liking football, or that there's something genuinely wrong with me. But once they hear that it's just something that happens sometimes, and some people are just like this, you know, that they don't want to do that to you. They would like to know if they are inadvertently harming you by being concerned, and the kinds of things that they're doing to try to express that concern. And this is why we need to have those conversations. But if every time you tried to talk about not really caring about football, or turning down an offer to come over and watch the game with like, I'm not interested in that, and then not only did everybody in your life treat you like this needs an intervention and this needs to be harassed out of you, but then there would also be people being like, you don't need to advertise that. You don't need to talk about that. Who cares that you don't like football? You sure make a lot of videos and content about something you don't like. Ha ha ha. And this is why the content should be out there for people to find from a young age. Because if you grow up with the knowledge that some people don't experience sexual attraction, even if you don't turn out to be one of those people, like the first time you meet somebody who does feel that way, you have context for it. You're like, oh, okay, I get that. And I think that knowing that is one thing you could be, realizing that's something you could turn out to identify as, is useful and helpful, and ultimately a really necessary part of our understanding of the full spectrum of human sexuality. So I don't think that it is corruption of any kind, obviously, to have knowledge about asexuality out there to be found, even by very young people, because we have context for heterosexuality far before most kids have their first, sexual attraction when they're going through puberty or whatever. And, we have Disney movies where people get married, and usually you'll have adults in your household who are in those relationships, and you've known about it since you can remember. But a lot of times, anything that is different from heterosexual partnerships will be demonized as if it's adult content, just categorically. And that's not true. And in the case of asexuality, some people have kind of tried to put that in a different category because there's no sex associated with it, which, as a lot of y'all know, that's not necessarily true. There are asexual people who have sex, right? But the fact that sex itself as an act is not associated with asexuality, some people try to say, well, you can teach about that, but you can't teach about gay people. You can't teach about trans people. Like, that's all too sexual. That's adult. But some people also put asexuality into that category because it can be considered queer, and they only think it's wholesome and worth teaching to children if it's straight people. It's a child-friendly version of explaining romantic relationships between different sex couples. So, but yeah, I mean, it's not wrong of us to want to have the content out there, prioritizing ourselves, prioritizing our people, because a lot of us who were here before there was a community know what that was like to not have any context for it. And I was not lying when I said in that response that I read earlier that I felt asexual at 14 or 15. I felt that way, but I did think I was going to change. I did assume that I was just maybe a little bit of a late bloomer, or that I was just going to take my time. I just kind of assumed it would change because, like, what context did I have for anybody not being interested in that and not forming their lives around some kind of romantic partnership? I feel like I would have benefited, and even though I really don't have a lot of pain from it, the way some people I knew from the same era had a lot of pain from rejection and from trying to force themselves into that box. I feel like it would have made me more confident about it, especially at the beginning, that I would have felt like less pressure to do like trial and error kind of situations where I felt like I had to date people just to be able to say I did it. And I don't know, I guess I value the experiences I did have, but it would have been nice to know that there were other people who felt the way that I did. And now that's a thing for the generations growing up now. It really is gross that somebody out there tried to frame that as if I was trying to convert people, or I was trying to infect them with some kind of philosophy. I mean, what do I even get for that? I promise you I don't get like royalty checks on how many people I can convert to asexuality. But yeah, one of the most important things I can say about that is exposure to these ideas is not what makes somebody's sexuality change. I think it can validate it and make you confident earlier. I don't think that it meaningfully contributes to stopping exploration, because, I mean, I hear all the time about how compelling sexual attraction is when it happens to you. So I'm pretty sure that if there's a bunch of fake asexuals lying in wait, pretending that they're not asexual and ignoring their sexual urges, it's like, well, I've heard that's really hard to do, even if it's gonna like ruin your life if you listen to them. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna say there are no people out there who are identifying as asexual when they're really not, but if it was so easy to change somebody's sexuality by exposing them to its existence, then why am I not straight? You know, how much heterosexual content I was fed throughout my life. I'm pretty sure if that worked, there wouldn't be anything other than straight people in the world, considering the ratio. Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm off base here, but one very small exposure to something that's not heteronormative probably shouldn't be capable of converting you to the dark side if you aren't already like predisposed to feeling like I see me. I see something that describes what I have felt. And even though I agree in principle that young people should keep their options open, they should definitely understand that there are a lot of years left to live for most people, that they will have new experiences, they should be open to those things. I feel like that should only be delivered on a very broad note, because otherwise it can sound like invalidation. It can definitely sound like, yeah, well, you know, I don't believe you actually. I think that you need to keep your options open. I'm not gonna actually say anything supportive. Like, I don't like how it sounds, even though I do broadly believe in the concept of keeping an open mind throughout your entire life. And obviously it's true that when you're younger, you're more likely to discover things about yourself that you didn't know, because your experience before that age is more limited and your exposure to other ideas and other people is more limited. But even though obviously it happens that some people are fluid, or some people discover things about themselves in later life that they feel necessitates a change of label and a change of lifestyle, it is, I'd say, primarily something that happens to younger people, that they explore their identity and figure out what it is. I don't think that we should shame people who are sure early in their lives. And, you know, if I had felt asexual at 14 and 15 like I did, and then when I was 19 something happened that made me feel like, yeah, I'm gonna have to change what I call myself because I've now experienced something that I didn't before. But that didn't happen. And it turned out that I was one of those people who knew from a relatively early age that that was appropriate for me. So I think that we should validate people regardless of how young they start saying it. And, you know, obviously there'll be like 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds who say things like, yucky, I'm never gonna get married, that's gross, I'll never do that, that's disgusting, you know, like little kids, you know, poo-poo it, and then usually they will grow up to have some kind of attraction to somebody else. But, I mean, that's not what I'm talking about here. Like, you can also be kind to toddlers. You can also be like, let me hold back my shitty adult urge to be like, yeah, you'll change your mind when you're older, champ. Ha ha ha. So, gross. Anyway. People are really eager for like little babies to be put into those contexts, aren't they? You see it with a lot of like really heteronormative people. They try to say that like a baby is flirting, or they put some gross message on their onesie that says she's going to be a heartbreaker, or daddy says I can't date till I'm 30 or whatever. And I'm like, oh my God, who is it who is sexualizing children at this point? You know, like, that ain't cute. But anyway, yeah. So I'd be interested to hear from my audience here as to, when did you know you were asexual, if that's your orientation? When did you feel pretty sure? And did you have a journey to accepting that label? Did you have a journey from asexual to some modified form of it? Just, I'm interested to hear kind of how other people's experience was, since mine was relatively straightforward, and I was actually surprised when I found out how much diversity there is in how people come to this identity. So it wasn't available for me to say, I put it into Google and I found Avon, like a lot of people say that from generations after mine. And that wasn't an option for us, but we're here now, and we gotta be good to the next generation. So that's my message, and I hope y'all have a great rest of the month. Bye.